Hey guys, welcome to Green Bean Fiction. So in today's video we are gonna see, what if Deku became Death Reaper's successor? This story is The Hero of Death by roprothepro. Before starting, make sure to hit that like button, as your one like motivates me to bring more stories, and subscribe the channel if you are new so you won't miss our latest videos. Izuku Midoriya stared down at the scarred wooden desk, focusing intently on the notebook beneath him. It was his 13th volume of hero analysis, a testament to his unwavering determination, even if everyone else refused to see it. The classroom buzzed around him, a murmur of laughter and chatter he was never a part of. He barely noticed anymore. "Oi, Deku!" Izuku flinched, shoulders tightening instinctively. Katsuki Bakugo loomed over him, flanked by a group of smirking classmates. Izuku tried not to look up, his fingers trembling slightly as they clutched his notebook closer. "Ignoring me, huh?" Bakugo sneered, snatching the notebook right out of Izuku's hands. "Let's see what useless crap you're writing now." Give it back," Izuku mumbled weakly, reaching out only to have his hand roughly slapped away. Bakugo flipped through the pages, his face twisting with disgust. "Still scribbling dreams you'll never reach, huh? Pathetic." Before Izuku could even react, sparks crackled from Bakugo's palm, and with a sharp crack, the notebook exploded. Shredded pages fluttered down around Izuku like mocking snowflakes. "Trash like you will never be a hero," Bakugo growled, tossing the charred remains at Izuku's feet. The class laughed. The teacher glanced over, bored and uninterested, before returning to his papers. Izuku silently gathered the ruined pages, eyes hot with unshed tears, his jaw clenched tight. The rest of the day passed in numbness. Words floated past him, lessons delivered in a monotone blur. No one spoke to him. No one cared. The only sounds that mattered were the snickers that trailed behind him like shadows. When the final bell rang, Izuku fled from the suffocating halls of Aldera Middle School, clutching the remains of his precious notebook tightly. He wanted nothing more than to disappear. The familiar route home brought little comfort today. The street was crowded, bustling with life that seemed indifferent to his own. He passed vendors calling out prices, children laughing, and a group of heroes posing for pictures across the street. None of it reached him. He paused briefly, kneeling to help an elderly man retrieve his fallen groceries. The old man thanked him, smiling, and for a fleeting moment, Izuku felt like maybe, just maybe, he still had something to give. A distant explosion shattered the moment. The ground trembled beneath his feet. Windows cracked. People screamed. Izuku spun toward the noise. Chaos had erupted in the middle of the street. A hero and villain clashed violently, unleashing powers that distorted and twisted the air itself. The villain's quirk warped the space around him, forming jagged tears in the fabric of reality. The air shimmered unnaturally, flickering like static on a broken screen. Light bent in impossible ways. People ran, panicked and terrified. Izuku tried to move, but the fleeing crowd shoved him forward, closer to the swirling epicenter of the fight. He stumbled, falling hard to the ground. He lifted his head. The villain's body pulsed with unstable energy. The pro-hero, a tall woman clad in silver and red armor, shouted something Izuku couldn't hear. The two combatants unleashed their attacks at the same time. A surge of force cracked the world apart. The space around Izuku twisted violently. Reality screamed, and then, he was gone. There was no falling, no transition. 1 second he was on a broken sidewalk, and the next, nothing. He awakened, if it could be called that, suspended in utter darkness. There was no ground beneath his feet. No light above, no sound. He gasped reflexively, but there was no air, only a cold, consuming emptiness. He should have died, should have suffocated, but the void refused him even that. His notebook floated silently beside him, torn and blackened, but still intact. It drifted toward him like a memory. He grabbed it desperately, clinging to it like a lifeline. Hello," he called out. No response. His voice was swallowed instantly. No echo, no reverberation, just silence. Izuku began to move, or tried to. He kicked, flailed, twisted. There was no resistance, no friction, no way to tell if he was even moving at all. No up, no down. He marked a page, then another. He tried to track time, tried to create some kind of structure. But time didn't exist here. Sleep never came. Hunger never came. Days bled into years, years into eternity. He wrote until ink bled through his fingers. His words grew erratic, his thoughts frayed. He began talking to himself, not to hear an answer, but to hear anything. "I will be a hero," he whispered. Over and over, his voice cracked, then disappeared. He tried screaming, tried tearing at the void, tried throwing the notebook. It always came back, it always returned. Nothing else changed. He laughed once, then again. Then he couldn't stop. The void never fought him, never spoke, never moved. It simply was. That was the worst part. He lost track of who he was. His name, his face. Only the notebook remained, its worn cover and fading ink the last fragments of who he used to be. And still, somewhere deep inside, a whisper clung to him. "I will be a hero." But here, in the endless void, that promise meant nothing. And still he whispered it, because it was all he had left. Time was a corpse in the void. Dead, forgotten, buried beneath infinity. Izuku floated, curled in on himself, the notebook clutched to his chest like a childhood toy. His lips moved constantly now. Words, some coherent, some not, often meaningless. His voice was hoarse, yet soft, like he was afraid to wake something. But there was nothing to wake. No eyes in the dark. No gods watching. No monsters stalking. Only him. Only this. He began writing upside down. Sideways. Carving words into pages with his nails when the ink ran dry. Letters scratched and spiraled, until some stopped resembling language at all. He laughed. Then he cried. Then he laughed again, and couldn't remember why. The notebook, his last companion, started changing. Not physically. It was the same broken object. But its words moved. Sometimes he'd look away and find new symbols where old ones used to be. His own writing rearranged itself. Or maybe he was hallucinating. Maybe he'd written it all along. He began whispering to the shadows around him, asking them questions, begging for answers. Nothing responded, not even a sound. One day, if you could call it that, he screamed. A real, primal scream. And for the first time, the void rippled. It wasn't much, just a flicker, a distortion in the eternal stillness. But Izuku froze. Something had changed. He whispered again, gentler now. "Please, let me out, please." Nothing. He screamed again, this time, deliberately, and again, the faintest shimmer. He tried shaping the darkness, willing it, forcing it, his hands extended, shaking, and for the briefest second, there was a tendril. A string of darkness wrapped around his wrist. He yanked back, heart pounding. Or at least, he imagined his heart was pounding. The void wasn't alive, but maybe it could be bent. He grinned, feral, broken. "I can make it move," he whispered. "I can make it listen." More time passed. He molded shadows into shapes, misshapen figures that barely resembled people. They danced around him, hollow echoes. One looked like All Might, another like his mother, both of them faceless. He spoke to them, gave them names, then forgot them, gave them new ones. He built a throne of darkness and sat upon it, a prince of madness. His notebook became a scripture. He wrote legends of the dark, fables of void beasts that never existed. Or maybe they did. He didn't know anymore. He created companions, a shadow with a crooked grin, another with dozens of arms. They didn't speak, but they listened. That was enough. Sometimes, he would try to remember his name. He'd draw it in the air, but the letters felt foreign now. Wrong. Midoriya. No, that wasn't right. That belonged to someone else. He tore the name apart, and from its pieces shaped a new identity, one made of silence and shadow. "I will be a hero," he said. And for the first time in what may have been centuries, the shadows around him nodded. There was no beginning to this day, nor end to the last. The void did not measure such things. But something was different, subtle, heavy. Izuku was no longer curled. He stood, if standing could be called hovering in an infinite abyss. His body no longer bore the softness of flesh. He had become something else. Shadow and bone, silence and thought. His form writhed like smoke given purpose. Loose robes of darkness clung to a frame that didn't move so much as it simply was. His face had long since vanished, smoothed into an eyeless, mouthless mask of swirling black. Only the shape of a head remained, crowned by spiked tendrils of void stuff that floated behind him like a twisted mane. Around him were his constructs. A dozen now, maybe more. They stood in a loose circle, withered silhouettes with hollow chests and warped limbs, each more abstract than the last. They pulsed gently, like stars breathing. Their forms were crude imitations of life. One too thin, one with arms for legs, one made entirely of dripping ink. "Don't look at me like that," Izuku growled. The constructs didn't move. "You were the one who said I should tear the name apart. You agreed with me." Still silence. He paced. The void bent beneath him now, allowed him to walk, to glide. His cloak, made of pitch and nothing, flared with each motion like a king's train. "No, no, no. Don't lie. You were there. You saw it. I tried to hold on to it. The name, the light, the warmth. But it rotted." One of the constructs twitched. A subtle gesture. Nothing more. But Izuku flinched like he'd been struck. He spun to face it. "Say that again. Go on. Say it again. Say it with a voice, you coward." "Nothing." He snarled and raised a hand. The construct shivered. A thread of void curled up from Izuku's palm and wrapped around the shadow's form, squeezing. "Say it." The figure cracked apart like glass, vanishing into wisps. The others watched. Not with fear. They could not feel that. But they leaned slightly away, as if repelled by the shift in their master's mind. Izuku lowered his arms slowly, shoulders rising and falling as though breathing. But he hadn't needed to breathe in centuries. He crouched, touching the endless void beneath him. His fingers left trails of dark energy, which began to swirl. He created a garden, not of plants, but of spires and monoliths. Great towers of writhing darkness rose from the endless floor, spiraling into the nothingness above. A throne, even grander than before, formed at the center, crafted from jagged shards of frozen time and ink. He sat. "I am the only thing that lives here," he whispered to himself. "I am the heart of nothing." One of the constructs, a smaller one with stubby limbs and no face, waddled closer and stopped at his feet. "What's that? You want a story?" He tilted his head, listening to the silence as though it spoke volumes. "All right then, a story, but only one." He raised the notebook again. Its cover was barely holding together. Its pages were full, and yet, more space always seemed to remain. He opened it and read aloud nonsense. Or prophecy, or madness. He laughed. "You remember the hero, don't you? The one who wanted to save people." The construct tilted its head. "He died, or maybe he changed. Became something better, stronger, eternal. He became me." He spread his arms wide. The shadows pulsed in response. "I am the void now. I am its will." He leapt down from the throne, and as he landed, the ground rippled outward with rings of inky shockwaves. He began crafting again. Massive walls, gates, a twisted city of memory and darkness. Echoes of Musudafu rendered in haunting silhouettes. The school, the streets, his old apartment, all built from the scraps of his fading mind. The construct that resembled his mother stood near the recreation of their kitchen. Silent, watching, still faceless. He turned from her. "Don't look at me like that either. I did what I had to do. No one came for me. No one looked." The air, if it could be called that, seemed to shiver. He looked up. There, in the distance. A dot, light. He froze. Every construct in his domain stopped moving. Even the swirling void stilled for a moment. Izuku rose from his crouch, staring. A pinprick of warmth. So far away, so small, yet it was unmistakable. "No." His voice cracked, shook. "No, no, no. That's not real. That's a trick. That's a trap." The light pulsed, ever so slightly brighter. He took a step forward. The ground beneath his feet stretched. The constructs faded behind him, forgotten. His hand trembled as he reached toward it. The void screamed, but he didn't stop. He took another step, then another, and the light grew. For the first time in countless ages, Izuku felt something. Hope. The light swallowed him. It didn't burn. It didn't blind. It simply was. And that made it even more alien. Izuku stepped forward. The void fell away like crumbling paper, and with each step, sensation returned. Sound, smell, wind, gravity. His foot touched solid ground for the first time in what felt like eternity. He staggered forward into a chamber filled with machines and blinking lights. Tubes hissed. Monitors beeped. The air was sterile and cold. The scent of ozone clung to everything. A man stood frozen at the other end of the room. A tall figure in a lab coat, goggles pushed up on a sweaty brow, wild hair sticking in all directions. His face had gone pale as ash. He was screaming, though no words came out. Only gasps. Terror. Izuku took another step forward. The man stumbled back, bumping into a console. He scrambled for a control panel, frantically slamming buttons. His hands shook violently. A mirror, small, angled on a wall, caught Izuku's eye. He turned to it slowly. The thing in the reflection was not human. A shifting mass of shadow, humanoid in shape but abstract in detail. Tendrils curled behind him like ribbons of night. His outline flickered, undefined. Where his face should have been was a smooth, black void that rippled like liquid ink. Eyes were hinted at, but only when the light caught just right, and even then, they were wrong. He stared at himself, and for a moment, he felt nothing. Not horror, not grief, just silence. The scientist screamed now, truly screamed, and jabbed a final button on the console. A rift began to open, crackling, unstable, flickering with the same energy that had once torn Izuku from his world. Izuku tilted his head, and something inside him snapped. From his back, spikes of pure void launched forward, impaling the man before he could scream again. The scientist jerked violently, eyes bulging in horror and agony, then collapsed in a heap. The rift began to destabilize. The machines sparked, overloaded. Lights exploded. One by one, the machines died. Izuku stood in silence, the void spikes retracting back into him like smoke drawn into a lung. He stared at the remains of the rift. He could feel it, resisting, like the void itself was clawing to come back through with him. But it collapsed before it could. A gust of wind stirred his cloak of shadows. He walked forward slowly, each step melting into pools of black that faded behind him. A newspaper lay discarded on the floor, half tucked beneath an overturned chair. He reached down, fingers ghosting over the brittle paper, and lifted it. The date read, March 31st 20XX. 4 years. Only 4 years. He collapsed into a sitting position, paper in his hands. His limbs shivered, not from cold, but from the overwhelming disconnect. 4 years out here, eons in there. He tried to speak, to ask where he was, to scream. What came out was not a voice. A guttural, broken sound exploded from his form, garbled, warped, sharp and low and high all at once. It scraped the walls like nails on glass, warping the air itself. IAMSTILLRE. The sound twisted the air like feedback from a broken speaker, warping into a horrible, low-pitched screech that made the nearby glass crack. Lights flickered, circuits hissed and popped. The building groaned. He staggered back, hand clutching at what might have been his throat, though it had no shape anymore. He couldn't speak to them. Couldn't communicate. His words were cursed, fragmented, distorted, painful to others, incomprehensible to himself. He stood among the wreckage. The broken lab, the corpse, the dead machines. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know what had changed. Only that he had, and that the void had not let him go empty-handed. It clung to him. It bled into the world with every step he took. The shadows twisted unnaturally where he passed, cracks forming in the walls, wires rusting, screens glitching violently in his presence. He made his way through the ruined facility, past ruined elevators, scorched walls, and long dead signs. He didn't know how far he walked. And then, light, true light, a rusted catwalk, a broken door, and beyond it, the sky. He stepped outside, onto the catwalk, and stared up. The sun. It was warm, so warm. The shadows trailing from his body hissed in protest, but he didn't care. He stood there for a long time, staring up at the sky like a man lost in a dream. Birds flew overhead. A breeze rolled across his half-melted silhouette. It wasn't real, but he didn't want it to end. And then, he smiled. The void was inside him. But so was the world. The sun was blinding, not just in brightness, but in presence. It pressed against Izuku's form like a weight, revealing every crack in his makeshift shell. The warmth was alien after eons of numb cold, and though part of him wanted to bask in it forever, the other, the void, ached to retreat. He couldn't linger. The facility behind him was dead. Burned and broken, whatever experiment had brought him back was silenced, its mastermind impaled and forgotten. Izuku stepped off the catwalk and into the woods beyond, leaving streaks of shadow in his wake. The trees recoiled at his presence, branches curling away, leaves wilting where he passed. He wandered. Days, weeks, he didn't know. Time had lost all meaning long ago. But he watched. From rooftops, from alleyways, from shadows, and slowly, a fractured picture formed in his mind. Hero society still stood, though it cracked beneath the surface. Pro-heroes paraded on screens. Children in uniforms still trained in grand academies. The name All Might still echoed in commercials and headlines. But Izuku didn't belong. Not anymore. He tried to speak to a man once, to ask the year, the city. But the words tore from his throat like broken glass. The man collapsed, screaming, blood streaming from his nose and ears. Izuku fled before help could arrive. He was alone again. He needed something. Someone, to anchor him. But there was no one left. And so he wandered. He studied his form in every reflective surface he could find. Windows, water, shattered glass, always the same. A flickering mass of shadow vaguely humanoid in shape. Tendrils whipped around his body like liquid smoke. His face never formed. No matter how hard he tried. He could feel the features he wanted. Eyes, nose, mouth. But when he willed them into existence, they slipped away like fog between fingers. Eventually, he found a solution. A white kitsune mask, stolen from a festival booth in an abandoned warehouse. He stared at it for hours before pressing it into his face. It sank into the shadows and held. A symbol, a boundary, something to focus the chaos. He didn't look human, but he looked closer. He walked with purpose now, though each step still left smudges of void on the ground. Every few hours, his body would destabilize, his limbs unraveling, his core collapsing into a heap of flickering black mist. He'd claw his way back to form, silently screaming, shaking until the shape returned. He began to act. A mugging in an alley. 3 men with knives. He melted from the shadows, impaled 2 before they could blink. The third tried to run. Izuku let him. A villain attacking a store. Pro-heroes were minutes away. Izuku didn't wait. The villain vanished into the dark with a whisper and a wet snap. The store owner screamed, but when the police arrived, there was no attacker. Just flickering footage. A mask in the dark. A domestic abuser dragging his wife down a street by her hair. Izuku's shadows wrapped around his neck and lifted him off the ground. The woman ran. The man didn't. A drug lab hidden behind an old laundromat. Izuku entered through the ceiling, descended like death, and when the smoke cleared, the only thing left breathing was the dust. He was being noticed. Online forums buzzed with rumors of a faceless wraith dispensing justice. A new vigilante, or maybe a ghost. People called him Kitsune, Shadewalker, the Black Fox. None knew his name. He didn't care. The void didn't need names. But in moments of stillness, when the shadows curled tighter and the silence returned, he whispered it anyway. Izuku. He didn't know if it still belonged to him. He began to map the city in his head, identifying its rhythms, its rot, its bleeding edges. He learned which alleys fed violence, which corners bred despair. He became a ghost in their systems. Security cams failed when he passed. Lights dimmed. Phones lost signal. He tried to write again. Not in a notebook, but into the walls of abandoned buildings. Messages etched in burnt black symbols, half language, half memory. I am still here. They forgot me. The void remembers. Late one night, perched atop a ruined billboard, he watched heroes battle a monstrous villain in the distance. He didn't move to help. Not this time. His form trembled, melting at the edges. One arm dissolved entirely. He reformed it with effort, breath ragged though he no longer needed air. He was tired. Tired of breaking. Tired of fixing himself with nothing but will and pain. He wanted to be seen. To be known. But to appear was to bring fear. To speak was to bring pain. So he waited, watched, hunted in the dark like a myth. And from the shadows, he listened. He heard whispers of unrest. Of villains gathering in secret. Of a place called Camino. Of a man with a hand on his face and murder in his eyes. He felt the void inside him stir. And for the first time in a long, long while, he felt purpose. The girl ran. She sprinted barefoot through the alley, sobbing, her cheek bruised, her lip split. Behind her, a man stalked with malicious calm, calling after her with venom-drenched promises. "Come on, sweetheart, don't make this harder than it needs to be." She slipped, crashed into trash bins, tried to crawl. Then everything stopped. The man froze, confusion on his face. Something moved behind him, a ripple in the air, a shimmer of shadow. He turned, and was gone. The girl turned just in time to see a flicker of black where the man had stood. Then nothing. Just an empty alley and a whisper of wind. A figure stood in the dark. Humanoid, cloaked in writhing shadow. A white kitsune mask gleamed in the moonlight, hanging just slightly askew. The girl bolted, didn't look back. She wouldn't speak of this again. Moments later, a shape dropped from a nearby lamppost, landing with precision and silence. A man with tired eyes and wild hair. Black scarf swirling like a serpent around him. Eraserhead. "Vigilante justice is illegal," he said coolly, not bothering to announce himself further. "Under the Meta-Human Regulation Act of 2045, you're under arrest." The masked figure didn't respond. It tilted its head, twitching. Eraserhead activated his quirk. The shadows slowed, but didn't vanish. The figure began to crack and split at the edges. Izuku moved forward. His voice, when it came, was scattered and dissonant. Not the way it was supposed to be, not the way. No face, no name, no light. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. "What the hell are you?" Izuku twitched violently, one leg collapsing into a puddle of ink before reforming. He spoke again, but not to Aizawa. "No, not now. He's watching. He's real." "No, you said he wouldn't find me. You lied." He lashed forward. Their fight began in a blur of motion. Aizawa's scarf snapped and caught, binding one arm. Izuku melted through it, spinning to strike with claws formed from shadow. Aizawa rolled, countered, struck with a reinforced boot to Izuku's mask. The mask cracked. Another hit. The mask broke free and clattered to the ground. There was nothing underneath. A hollow void where a face should be. No features. Just an endless absence. A hole in space. Aizawa froze. His scarf slackened. He stared. He couldn't look away. Something pulled at his mind. A whisper just beneath hearing. A pressure behind his eyes. Time stretched, twisted, frayed at the edges. The void stared back, and in it, he saw himself. Or what was left of himself. The alleys vanished. The world fell away. He was floating. No, drowning in the void, consumed by the nothing. The weight of time crushed him. Images bled together. Students' faces, his childhood, old wounds, all spiraling into black. He wanted to blink, to breathe, to scream, but nothing worked. He was held. Izuku didn't move. Then, slowly, he reached down and drove a spike of void into Aizawa's side. Not fatal, but deep. The pain barely registered. Aizawa crumpled, still staring, eyes wide and unblinking, lips trembling. Izuku picked up the broken mask and pressed it into the shadows of his face. It reformed, jagged and lopsided. Then he turned to the alley wall and, using Aizawa's blood, carved 4 words in long, jagged strokes. The void stares back, and then he was gone. By the time backup arrived, Aizawa was alive. Barely, rambling, laughing, weeping. There was no face, no soul. "I saw it. I saw it. It's still in me. It's watching me. I can't make it stop looking." He scratched at his arms, at his eyes. "It's in the walls. In my head. The void doesn't blink. The void doesn't sleep." He screamed until they sedated him. And even then, as they wheeled him away, his voice rasped one last phrase. "The void knows my name." The heroes stood in silence, shaken to their core. Something terrible had come back. And it had seen them. The hospital lights were too bright. Aizawa lay strapped to the bed, monitors beeping steadily, but his eyes never closed. They were dry, bloodshot, open, staring. He hadn't blinked in almost 12 hours. He muttered under his breath, sometimes loud enough to catch. "No face. No face. It looked through me." Recovery girl had done what she could. Sedatives dulled the screaming, but couldn't stop the panic. When he wasn't crying, he laughed. When he wasn't laughing, he whispered to someone who wasn't there. Present Mike stood outside the room, gripping the doorframe hard enough to shake. Nezu and a handful of heroes sat in a quiet conference room nearby. The lights were dim. No one raised their voice. "It's not like him," one said. "He's seen things. He's fought things. But not this," another replied. "Not something that broke him without even touching his mind directly." There was no clear footage. Just moments of static, glimpses of motion, and at the end of it all, Aizawa half dead on the ground and 4 words painted in blood. The void stares back. Far from the hospital, in the belly of the city, something watched from a rooftop. Izuku. His shape pulsed faintly beneath the mask. His body half collapsed into a pool of black before pulling itself back together again. He didn't move like a person. He twitched, twisted, folded. Below him, people moved. Normal, alive, real. He copied them sometimes. Practiced walking like them, standing, waving. But it never looked right. His arms were too long. His hands shook. When he waved, children cried. When he stood still, animals fled. He didn't remember what smiling felt like. He reached out, shadows stretching across the gap between buildings to grab a discarded newspaper. The front page showed Aizawa being wheeled into the hospital. Pro-hero Eraserhead suffers mental breakdown after vigilante attack. Izuku stared at the photo. He didn't feel guilt. He didn't feel anything, but the void inside him whispered. Echoes of time long gone. He was afraid. I remember fear. The paper crumpled, shadows devouring it like ash. Elsewhere in the city, the League of Villains moved in silence. They were gathering, waiting, preparing for Kamino. Izuku watched from far above. Shigaraki laughed as he tore apart a billboard. Twice argued with Toga. Dabi smoked in the shadows. Izuku watched them like a phantom at the edge of a dream. He didn't understand them, not fully, but something about them felt wrong. Like they didn't belong in the world any more than he did. He didn't approach, not yet, but he followed. Every time they moved, the shadows near them deepened. They whispered their secrets to him. And the void remembered. Back at the hospital, Aizawa screamed again. He's in the walls. He's under the floor. The void. The void. His voice cracked, raw and broken. Present Mike was still there. He hadn't spoken in hours. His friend was gone, but not dead. Something worse. Inside the observation room, someone whispered. He hasn't blinked once. In the silence that followed, Nezu said quietly, we should prepare for the possibility that he never will again. A nurse asked, do we know what attacked him? No one answered. They had theories. None of them were comforting. Outside, on a nearby rooftop, Izuku sat curled in shadow, watching the city through the eyeholes of his cracked mask. He didn't speak, but deep in his chest, the void whispered a single word. Soon. It started with whispers. A hero from Hosu was found standing in the middle of his apartment, unmoving, staring at the wall for 6 hours. When someone finally reached him, he didn't blink, just kept muttering the word, emptiness. Then came a student at Shiketsu who collapsed during a routine exercise. Screaming, clutching his chest, his quirk activated uncontrollably, nearly electrocuting a classmate. When they reached him, he kept repeating, the sky, it's watching. It's watching me. By the end of the week, 5 more heroes had been pulled from active duty. One for hallucinations, another for a complete emotional shutdown, non-responsive to anything but blinking lights. One had attempted to claw out his own eyes, leaving deep scars, screaming about the cracks behind reality. The media spun it as burnout, psychological collapse from stress, trauma from the high-stakes world they lived in. But inside the pro-hero networks, there was another word being used. Mass psychogenic illness, MPI, mass hysteria. Whispers said it was spreading like a sickness. No source, no cause, only effect. Fear with no face, panic without trigger. It slipped between the cracks in routine. It walked unseen, except some of them suspected there was a face. They just couldn't remember it. Izuku moved through the city like smoke. Like thought, like rot. He didn't always walk. Sometimes he drifted. Other times he simply appeared, leaking out from cracks in the pavement or coalescing from a shadow too thick to belong to any natural shape. He didn't always mean to be seen. But he was. Fleetingly, a hero would glance down an alley and see a silhouette watching them. When they turned to confront it, the shape was gone, but the dread remained. A student would hear something whisper their name in a crowd. But no one was there. Nothing matched the voice. Cameras caught nothing but static. Phones dropped calls when he passed nearby. Lights dimmed. Reflections stopped syncing with motion for just a second too long. And those who encountered him directly, who saw him just long enough to recognize that there was no face under the mask, they broke. Izuku didn't fight them. He didn't touch them. He simply was. And that was enough. At UA, the tension rose like pressure before a storm. Kyoka Jiro sat in bed at 2:17 a.m., headphones over her ears, shaking. The music didn't help anymore. Her walls had started to whisper, not actual words, just tones. Long, low frequencies that no one else heard. She checked the circuits. No issues. Down the hall, Tenya Iida stared into the mirror. It stared back wrong. His reflection didn't blink when he did. He slammed the light off and walked away, but when he turned back, his reflection was still there, watching. Midnight had stopped teaching entirely. No announcement, no explanation, just a substitute standing awkwardly in front of a class that didn't ask questions. In Class 1B, a third-year girl lashed out mid-lesson, screaming that her shadow was smiling at her. It took 3 teachers to restrain her. Principal Nezu increased surveillance. Teachers whispered to each other behind closed doors. Rumors trickled into the halls. The school's security logs began showing time gaps. Files corrupted, footage missing, always near blind spots, always just out of frame. Above them all, high on a rooftop, Izuku sat curled in shadow, watching the glowing windows of UA. The building pulsed with warmth, with memory. It felt familiar, but he didn't know why. He watched the students through broken glass, through warped cameras, through mirrors they thought were empty. He didn't act. Not yet, not here, but his presence soaked into the walls. His shadow moved independently now, slithering through corners, whispering pieces of forgotten voices into sleeping ears. He'd been part of the void for too long to remember what connection was. But UA called to him. He couldn't remember being here, couldn't remember any of them. And yet, something about them pulled at the last flickers of what remained. Almost something. Nezu sat in his private office, watching the footage of Aizawa's collapse for the 30th time. The hero's wide, unblinking eyes. The screaming. The blood. And above it all, the message written in long, jagged script. The void stares back. Whatever it is, Nezu muttered to himself, it doesn't just hurt. It changes. He tapped a file labeled MPI Alpha, and added a name to the list. Another student. Another symptom. Another crack forming in the walls. Outside, the sky rumbled. Izuku's mask tilted skyward. He remembered rain. A building. Not just a building. UA. The name echoes somewhere inside him. He doesn't know why. Doesn't know what it means. He watches it from above. Every day. Every night. The students are loud. Alive. Full of things he no longer understands. Joy. Anger. Purpose. He stares down at them. And something inside him burns. Not pain, not fire, just a heat, faint, familiar. The halls pulse with energy. So many people in one place. So many paths crossing. Too loud, too fast. He remembers silence. The quiet of the void. He misses it. He hates it. He is pulled here. Like gravity. Like breath. Why? The windows reflect light. His shape doesn't. Sometimes he sees a face. Not his own. A smiling boy, green eyes, notebook in hand, gone. Other times he sees a boy with anger in his eyes, sharpness, explosion in his hands. Something inside Izuku recoils, or snarls. He doesn't know which. He watches that boy, closely. What is his name? Why does it matter? There's no answer. Just heat, anger, a wordless echo. Why did you leave me? No, that's not right. Why did you hurt me? Still wrong. There's a notebook in his head. Pages torn out. Blank spots. He flips through them every night. UA was a dream. A place for heroes. Was he a hero? No, not anymore. Maybe not ever. He presses his hand to the glass. Feels the warmth inside. The laughter. The hope. It makes him feel hollow. The halls twist when he watches. The lights flicker. Students whisper about shadows. He tries not to be seen. But he always is. A teacher stumbles in the hallway. Another goes silent mid-lecture. A student collapses in the dorm showers. One wakes screaming. He doesn't mean to hurt them. He just wants to remember. Why does this place feel like a scar? He sees himself sometimes. Not the shadow. Not the mask. The boy. The one with hope in his eyes. He hates that boy. No. He misses him. No. He doesn't know. Fragments. Everything is fragments. One night, he crouches on the roof. A breeze runs through him. Not around. Through. He feels nothing. Hears everything. UA. High school. A girl's voice says somewhere below. The #1 hero academy in Japan. He tilts his head. That phrase. It stings. He wants to scream. But when he opens his mouth, nothing comes out but static and broken syllables. He's not a person. Not anymore. But he was something once. And that something wanted to be here. Why? Why? The void doesn't answer. It only watches with him. The silence was heavier inside. Izuku had entered UA. Not through the front gate. Not through any door. He flowed through the gaps. Slipped between vents. Bled through shadows beneath lockers and desks. No alarms. No detection. Just silence. And cold. The school pulsed around him with heat and light and life, and he was none of those things. He didn't belong here. He didn't care. Something inside him dragged him closer. Always closer. Down the halls. Into rooms. Through ceilings. Watching. Class 1A. He didn't know their names, but their presence burned into him like sunlight on rotting skin. He hovered in the ceiling above them. Between vents. Between light fixtures. Below, the students laughed. Sparred. Trained. One shouted something about curry night. Another practiced a dance move in front of a mirror. They were real. They were whole. Izuku tried to copy them. He bent his shadow into arms, legs. Tried to form a stance like the boy with the red hair. Then like the one with tape elbows. Then like the girl with the pink skin who laughed too loudly. None of it stuck. His body twitched, melted. Limbs fell off and had to be regrown. A leg warped sideways. Fingers became too long. His back cracked inward. He stared at them from behind the air vents, mimicking movements, over and over. Trying to get it right. But the void inside him didn't understand muscles, joints, expressions, and he had no face to match their joy. He tried to laugh like them once. It came out wrong, scraping, warped. It made the walls groan. Kyoka Jiro sat in the common room, scrolling through music files. Her ear jacks twitched. She paused. A sound. Not outside. Not in the room. Inside her head. Help me. She froze. Yanked out the ear jacks. Looked around. Empty. She plugged them back in. Nothing. Just music. Until she heard it again. Why? She pulled the headphones off and ran to the hall, heart racing. Her shadow flickered behind her, lagging, like it didn't want to follow. She told herself she imagined it. But she didn't sleep that night. Izuku slumped in a janitor's closet, his form breaking down again. One eye missing from the mask. The cloak dripped black onto the floor. Wrong. He was still wrong. He tried again. He twisted his arm to match the posture of the blonde boy who shouted a lot. It bent too far, snapped backward. He let it fall apart. Every time he copied them, he lost more of what little form he had. But he couldn't stop. Something here wanted him, or maybe he wanted it. He didn't know the difference anymore. The halls creaked. A teacher walked by, unaware of the thing behind the door, holding perfectly still, body half melted, whispering words with no mouth. I used to dream of this place. The void echoed it back. He didn't remember that dream. But his bones did. He drifted into the staff break room. There was coffee left on the table. Someone's thermos. Someone's bag with a keychain of All Might smiling in that golden pose. He hated it. No. Envied it. He wanted to be someone who could leave things behind. He floated through walls, past the nurse's office. The quiet girl inside had a nosebleed. Her shadow was staring at her. He didn't linger. Instead, he stood behind the mirror in the boys' locker room. Watched them file in, laugh, stretch, argue. Katsuki Bakugo walked past. Izuku twitched. He didn't know why. The mask cracked. Something in him screamed, wordless and deep. A rumble through every hallway he had touched. He reached out, didn't touch him, but came close. Bakugo paused, turned, frowned, looked over his shoulder. Nothing there, but the lights above him buzzed, glitched, and somewhere, far away in the dark of UA, Izuku curled inward again. He couldn't copy them, he couldn't be them, but he could haunt them. Kyoka hadn't slept, not really, not since the voice. It came through her ear jacks first, broken and lost like a signal from space. Then, after that night, she started hearing it without them. In the walls, in the hum of the lights, in her own footsteps, whispers, not always words, sometimes just sounds, pressure, breath. She hadn't told anyone, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know how. Who would believe her? She sat in her dorm room now, earjacks coiled tightly around her hands, knuckles pale. The music wasn't helping, nothing was helping, and she could feel it again. Behind the wall, just past the corner of her eye. Watching, not angry, just there. She flinched when Mina knocked on her door. "You okay in there?" Mina asked, her voice laced with concern. Kyoka hesitated. "Yeah," she lied, "just tired." Mina lingered for a moment before walking away. Kyoka listened to the fading footsteps. Then silence again. Not alone. Never alone. In the teacher's lounge, Present Mike stood in front of a whiteboard filled with incident reports. Red circles connected dates, names, rooms. "Another 3 students today," he muttered. "Hallucinations, nausea, dissociation. That makes, what, 30 this month?" Recovery girl nodded grimly. "It's accelerating." Midnight leaned on the counter, arms crossed tight. "You all feel it, right? I'm not crazy. It's colder in the halls now, even with the heat on." One of the support staff whispered, "I thought I saw something in the locker room mirror." But there was no one there. Powerloader didn't speak at all. He just stared at the wall, his face pale, eyes slightly unfocused. Nezu said nothing, just took notes, and watched the lights flicker above them. "I want full wellness checks by the end of the week," Nezu said softly. "And we're locking down non-essential rooms. Until we find out what this is. And if it's not a thing?" Present Mike asked, half under his breath. "What if it's just here?" No one answered. Izuku drifted. He no longer walked. He barely floated. He simply moved, as if his presence slid through dimensions thinner than air. He found her in the hallway. Kyoka. She was pacing, fingers trembling, heart loud. She didn't see him yet. He didn't know her, but she felt familiar. A warmth, a rhythm, music. He remembered music, strings, notes, something bright, fleeting. He reached out, not to hurt, to feel. His fingers, long, formless, cold, brushed her arm. Kyoka froze. The hallway dropped into silence. Her breath hitched. Then she screamed, because the touch wasn't just cold. It was absolute, like sinking into the deepest ocean. Like falling asleep and never waking. Like death, and comfort, a terrifying peace, a promise of rest. Her body locked up, eyes wide, mind blanking. She saw things, flashes, a shattered notebook, a burning skyline, a mask floating through void, and a name. She didn't know why she knew it. "Izuku," she whispered. He withdrew instantly, recoiling into the ceiling like a breath reversed. She collapsed, gasping, pale, eyes wild. She didn't speak again for hours. At 3:14 a.m., the security systems triggered across UA. Multiple students were found in the hallways, sleepwalking, staring, crying. Some had scrawled symbols on the walls in marker. One used blood, another whispered names no one recognized. A boy sat at the end of the hallway, facing the wall, muttering, "He sees us now. He sees us. He sees." The medics took him away. No one could explain it. And none of them remembered. MPI, mass psychogenic illness, was no longer whispered. It was on every staff report, every meeting, every shadow. Nezu filed a formal incident log, Phase 2 initiated. And still, no one knew the cause. But the walls did. The walls remembered his shape. And deep in the maintenance tunnels, beneath the heartbeat of the school, Izuku curled in shadow and whispered to himself. Almost right. His fingers flexed. A body half formed, limbs trembling. A face tried to exist. It didn't. Not yet, but soon. UA shut down. Not officially, not loudly, but the order was clear. Students were told to return home. Classes were suspended. Teachers stopped arguing. Staff stopped sleeping. Security drones shut down entire wings of the school. No one said why, but they all knew. The fear had become tangible, infectious, a presence that lingered in the corners of every room, behind every eye. Jiro hadn't spoken much since that night. Not about what she saw. Not about the name she whispered. Izuku. She didn't know who he was. But the name wouldn't leave her mind. It echoed in every note of music she played, lingered at the end of every thought. So when her parents picked her up, Jiro said nothing. She just climbed into the car, ear jacks wrapped tightly around her fingers, and stared out the window. She didn't know she was being followed. Izuku moved like silence made manifest. Past checkpoints, over fences, between camera frames. No one saw him leave the school grounds. But he followed her. He didn't know why. Jiro's presence felt different. Not like the others. Her mind hadn't broken completely. It bent, shifted, but didn't shatter. And she heard him. Not clearly, not always, but sometimes. Sometimes she listened, and his noise didn't drive her to madness. That intrigued him. So he lingered. Her house was small, comfortable, too bright. The moment she arrived home, the walls seemed to shrink. Her mother noticed the way she didn't speak. Her father asked questions. She answered none. That night, as they argued quietly downstairs, Jiro sat in her room with the lights off, headphones on, and her ear jacks plugged into a small soundboard. She wasn't listening to music. She was listening to him. The frequency was buried deep, below the static, beneath the normal range, but she could hear it. Faint, broken, dream. Her eyes widened. She didn't feel fear. Not anymore. She felt awe. The third night home, he appeared. Not fully, not yet, but a shadow formed in her wall. A silhouette across her window. A flicker in the mirror. She whispered, "Izuku." The shadow paused. Her heart didn't race. It bowed, and vanished. She didn't sleep. Instead, she wrote. Pages and pages. Scribbles, notes, symbols, lyrics she didn't recognize. She pinned them to her wall in spirals. She wasn't unraveling. She was understanding. Her parents noticed. Her mother grew terrified. Her father paced at night. Once, she caught him whispering about sending her to a hospital. She laughed. Not because it was funny. Because they didn't see. They didn't understand. He was beautiful, and he was choosing her. The fifth night, the shadows moved differently. Izuku appeared fully, standing in the corner of her room. Shapeless, but solid, mask cracked, form flickering, shadows crawling down the walls like ink. She didn't scream. She stood. She approached. His voice came through the jacks again. Lost. Me. She reached for him. Her fingers passed through. Still, she smiled. I'll help you remember, she whispered. Izuku didn't move, but for the first time in eons, he stayed. Jiro kept her room in darkness now. Not dim, not shaded, true darkness. The blinds never opened. The lights never flicked on. Even the glow from her electronics was smothered with tape and cloth. The only illumination was the faint pulse of red on her soundboard, the signal she tuned into every night. The signal that hummed with his voice. The void whispered to her in broken melodies. She wrote them down, line after line, a melody that made no sense on paper. Notes that spiraled into themselves, tempo shifts that broke every rule of rhythm, harmonies that made her stomach twist. But it sounded right. To her, it was beautiful. It played inside her head even when the headphones were off. Like it had burrowed into her bones. Outside her room, the world continued. Her parents checked in less and less. They were afraid. Not of her, but of what she was becoming. But she smiled more now. Spoke clearly when she chose to. Said she was working on music again. They believed her. They didn't see the trinkets. Tiny offerings. Guitar picks. A cracked tuning fork. A broken string from her favorite bass. Pins from old concerts. A torn wristband from a live show long past. Old pieces of UA memorabilia. A broken keychain. A Class 1A patch she'd never worn. Each night, she laid one at the foot of the darkest corner of her room. The one that never reflected light. The one that bent shadows around it. The one where he lived. She didn't know if he could feel the gifts. But every night, the static in her ears grew clearer. His voice sharpened, still fragmented, but now closer to words. Remember, you sang. And sometimes, curious, not a grave fraid. She spent hours just sitting and watching the void, staring into the impossibly dark corner. Sometimes speaking in circles, sentences that looped and rewound. Other times whispering secrets she didn't know she had. She was unraveling, slowly, methodically, but she called it clarity. A clarity that hurt. It was like trying to read a book in a language she didn't know, but remembered. The melody wasn't just a song anymore. It was a scripture, one her mind wasn't made to read, but tried anyway. He speaks in echoes, she wrote once. Time folds in him. He remembers things he never lived. Sometimes, Izuku said words that meant nothing. Mother. Still, where? He didn't know he had one. A mother. A beginning. The void had erased it. But Jiro caught the fragments. She's still alive, she whispered back once. You were loved. The void rippled, and for a second, his form faltered. A breath, a pause, then static. Lost. Name. Home. No. Name. She didn't mind the pain anymore. The headaches, the bleeding nose, the occasional blackout. It was the price for understanding. She needed to understand, to fill her walls with meaning. She didn't just want to worship the void. She wanted to translate it, to become the first speaker of its tongue, to learn how to make it sing. One night, the melody bled from her room, down the hall, through the vents. Her father, half asleep in the kitchen, paused while pouring tea. He heard it, just faintly, a low hum, a pattern, a pull. He turned, and for just a moment, thought he saw something in the reflection of the microwave, standing beside his daughter's door. Something tall, cloaked in shifting black. He blinked. It was gone. But he didn't go to bed. He sat at the kitchen table with the lights on, watching the hallway. And Jiro sang. It began with a song. Not played aloud, not broadcast, just a quiet hum that seeped through walls and wires. The melody Jiro recorded, the one she had named him to the void, did not need speakers. It resonated. Her parents didn't notice it at first. Just a strange stillness in the air when they walked by her door. A brief static buzz when her mother picked up the landline. The way the lights dimmed when her father passed the hallway at night. Then came the whispers. They weren't in words, not fully, just impulses, images, the feeling of falling upward, of drowning in breathless peace, of standing on the edge of a thought too large to contain. Jiro's mother began pausing outside her door. Her father lingered longer at night, staring at the darkened room, trying to parse the unease in his chest. Then one night, they listened. Jiro didn't invite them. She didn't need to. They came in quietly, drawn by the rhythm that curled into their minds like smoke. Jiro didn't stop playing. She didn't speak. She only stared into the void dark corner and sang in a language that wasn't one. Her mother stood behind her, unmoving. Her father sat cross-legged on the floor without realizing it. The fear didn't come, only silence, and understanding. The shadows in the room pulsed once. Izuku moved. The air grew thick, dense, like space folded in on itself. Her father's hand trembled. Her mother clutched at her chest, mouth slightly open, eyes glassy. They saw him, not clearly. But they saw enough. The shape of something that wasn't shaped. The echo of something that had no source. They stayed in that room for hours. When the lights rose again, no one spoke. Something had changed. The next morning, Jiro's father dismantled the old family shrine. Her mother walked from room to room in silence, covering every mirror with cloth. They didn't ask Jiro what had happened. They already knew. That evening, they placed their own offerings beside hers. An old family album with the pages torn out. Her father's wedding ring, left in a shallow bowl. A snapped guitar pick that had belonged to Jiro's first instrument. They laid them gently at the base of the wall where the shadows bent. Not as gifts, as devotion. At dinner, they sat in silence. The food remained untouched. They held hands, and together, they turned their gaze to the darkest corner of the dining room. It should have been empty. But it wasn't. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their faith had been sealed. Over the next few days, the melody never stopped. Jiro played at all hours, even when her fingers bled. She didn't feel the pain. Her mother hummed along while cleaning. Her father traced patterns onto the floor with chalk he didn't remember buying. At night, they dreamed. Not of places or people, but of shapes. Of shifting void. Of tendrils of thought, reaching into memory and rearranging it. Jiro's mother woke crying, whispering that she saw the universe blink. Her father wrote down a phrase again and again on scraps of paper: "It never forgot us." Sometimes, they caught glimpses of Izuku. A ripple in the wallpaper. A silhouette behind closed eyes. A hand reaching out from the corner, not to grasp, but to touch. They didn't fear it. They longed for it. One night, Izuku stood beside them. Fully formed, or as close as he ever came. Mask cracked, void pulsing beneath. Shadows trailing down his shoulders like a mantle. None of them moved. He didn't speak. But something deeper than voice passed through them. An understanding. A communion. Jiro smiled. Her parents wept. They were no longer simply a family. They were the first members of the cult of the Voidborn. And in the darkness they kept sacred, the shape of a forgotten boy lingered, watching. He didn't understand what they were becoming. But he stayed, because something inside him whispered. This is how gods begin. Kyoka Jiro became more than a follower. She became the voice of the void. While others only glimpsed shadow and heard static, she listened. She spoke, and sometimes, the void spoke back. To her parents, to the few who had already heard the song, she became something sacred, the high priestess of the Voidborn. It wasn't a title she asked for. But it fit. The melody continued to spread. It crept from her window on cold nights, riding on the air like smoke. Strangers walking by paused and stared. Some wept, some ran, a few stayed, frozen, transfixed. And when they moved again, they remembered something wrong. Something beautiful. People found the melody buried in corrupted files. In broken radios. In the static between channels. In the click of a turn signal. In the creak of old floorboards. It didn't speak to everyone. But to those already frayed at the edges, already cracked, it was a revelation. They came. Not in crowds, not in noise. The Voidborn did not seek chaos. They arrived quietly. Pilgrims at midnight. Strangers with vacant eyes and open hands. And Jiro welcomed them. She wrote what the void told her. She sang for them. And they listened. The Jiro household no longer resembled a home. The living room became a shrine. Chalk sigils covered the floor. The furniture was pushed aside, replaced with cushions and hand-woven mats. Offerings gathered daily. Forgotten childhood toys, broken instruments, torn journals, photographs with faces scratched out. Candles burned low and long, their wax pooled into symbols that seemed to write themselves. Izuku stood among them. He never addressed the crowd. He didn't need to. When Jiro sang, he stayed. And that was enough. They called it communion. The cult grew. A teacher from Jiro's old middle school was next, drawn by the static that echoed her nightmares. Then a retired hero with trembling hands, who wept at the sight of Izuku's silhouette. A lonely college student who dreamed of a voice wrapped in endless shadow. A street performer who had once heard Jiro play and could not forget the ache it left behind. All of them changed. Some wept, some laughed, most were quiet, but none of them turned away. Jiro began to write the codex. Pages and pages of visions, prophecies, warnings, and hymns. She bound them by hand, fingers ink-stained, eyes hollow but focused. There were no chapters, just waves of meaning. She titled it, The Book of Unknowing. The cover was made from the cover of her old school binder. The inside, filled with scrawls in both pen and blood, charcoal and ash. Every line came from a whisper she didn't remember hearing. And on the first page, beneath the symbol they all now wore carved into pendants, she wrote, "We are seen, we are heard, we are lost to the void, and it loves us still." Her followers copied the words onto walls, onto their skin, into the backs of old books. It became their greeting, their prayer, their benediction. And still, Izuku said nothing. But he stayed. The melody now had form. It was played in abandoned buildings, whispered in forgotten stations. People who heard it began to feel watched. Not with fear, but with longing. One man, homeless, nameless, forgotten, found himself sitting at the Jiro house steps, tears streaking down his cheeks. He simply said, I dreamed of silence, and it had your voice. Jiro let him in. He joined the others. The cult no longer needed to spread itself. The void did it for them. UA reopened without fanfare. No press. No statements. Just a quiet resumption of classes, like nothing had ever happened. The halls were freshly painted, the cameras recalibrated, the old rumors buried beneath polite smiles and new lesson plans. But something felt wrong the moment Kyoka Jiro walked through the gates. She had changed. No one could quite place it. She smiled more, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached the eyes. Her gaze drifted through people, past them, as if she were always looking at something just behind the veil. She hummed constantly, a tune no one recognized. The melody never varied, slow, dissonant, a harmony too warped to follow. When her friends asked where she'd been, she gave only riddles. I was listening. To what? Mina had asked. Kyoka had just tilted her head, blinking slowly. To the space between questions. She returned to her classes. Sat through lessons. Participated in group work. But she no longer laughed. No longer teased. She stared at shadows with far too much interest. She whispered under her breath when no one was looking. Every night, after curfew, she left the dorms. No one stopped her, not even the teachers. It was as if she slipped past their notice, drifting between reality and something just outside of it. Her classmates noticed, and one night, they followed. Mina, Kirishima, Denki, Momo, a few others, curious, concerned. They trailed her through the streets, keeping their distance. She walked like she knew exactly where to go. Not once did she look behind her. She arrived at her house. They crouched behind bushes, staring through the windows. Inside was a room of people, silent, seated in a circle. Jiro stood at the center, eyes closed, hands raised. Her voice floated over them, soft and slow, a lullaby from a forgotten world. Candles lined the walls. Symbols were drawn in chalk and ash. The air shimmered with something wrong. A shadow moved. Izuku stood at the back of the room. Still, watching. His eyes, if they could be called that, turned. And stared directly at them. Everyone froze. Everyone but Mina. She didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Her heart pounded. Then slowed. The hum inside her head grew louder. Familiar. Something called to her. Not a voice. Not a thought. Something deeper. Mina, no, Momo whispered, grabbing her arm. But it was too late. Mina stepped forward. One step. Then another. She walked to the door, slowly, methodically, like her body no longer belonged to her. Denki hissed, "What is she doing?" "She's gone," Kirishima murmured, eyes wide with horror. Mina pushed open the door. The air shimmered around her. The chanting inside quieted. Jiro turned, her face serene. Mina stepped into the circle. And knelt. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I see you," she whispered. Izuku didn't move, but something in the room shifted. The shadows pulsed. The walls trembled just slightly, like the house had exhaled. The others ran. They didn't look back. Didn't stop until they were safe inside the dorms, doors locked, breaths ragged. Denki spoke first. "What the hell was that?" No one answered. Then Kirishima, trembling, his voice barely more than a whisper, spoke. "We are seen. We are heard. We are lost to the void, and it loves us still." Silence followed, and then the lights flickered. The staff at UA was no longer in control. They pretended otherwise, of course. Meetings were held, reports were filed, pro-hero consultants were brought in to cross-reference mental health incidents. But the truth lay bare beneath the surface. They didn't understand what was happening. And worse, they didn't know how to fight it. Aizawa sat at the head of the latest emergency meeting, tired eyes darker than usual. His arm was still bandaged from the encounter weeks prior, his expression grim as he read through the latest set of behavioral logs. 37 students have reported sleep disturbances, he said flatly. 14 of them are from Class 1A. And those are just the ones who reported anything, Recovery Girl added. I'm more concerned with the ones who haven't said a word. Some of them don't even react to standard exams anymore. It's like they're there, but not present. They respond to their names, Midnight added, but they flinch when you say them. As if it isn't their name anymore. Nezu tapped a claw against the table. We've found a substance, he said carefully. Traces in the hallways, on lockers, beneath certain desks, very faint, nearly imperceptible. Quirk residue, present, Mike asked. No, not even close. Powerloader pulled up a hollow scan, black stains like shadows smearing across the floor. It doesn't match any quirk profile in our database. It's not organic, but it's not synthetic either. It's undefined, like it exists halfway in and out of measurable space. It registers on instruments, Smintos said, but it doesn't leave physical evidence. When we try to isolate it, the readings collapse. No radiation, Midnight noted. No heat, no scent, but the air around it is wrong. Like it's too dense to breathe properly. Like it's watching you. And this started after Jiro returned, Aizawa said, not looking up. A silence fell over the room. She's not the only one acting strange, Smintos muttered. Class 1A has been changing. Gradually, quietly. Strange how. Nezu pressed. They're more reserved. Their eyes don't meet yours. They speak in riddles. Some of them hum under their breath. Others vanish after curfew. How many? We don't know. Not exactly. They're clever about it. One of the janitors quit, Powerloader said. Said the walls were whispering his name. That he saw his reflection blink out of sync. Another silence. We've had a dozen transfer requests from other departments, Recovery Girl added softly. Some citing family matters. Others won't say why. Aizawa stood. I'll speak with them. You'll get nothing, Recovery Girl said gently. Whatever this is, it's not just affecting them. It's replacing them. They haven't been violent, Present Mike said. Not yet. Do we think they're being controlled? Midnight asked. Nezu folded his paws. No, this isn't control. This is faith. They didn't say it out loud, but they all knew. There was something in the walls. Something watching. And it was spreading. Later that night, Aizawa walked the halls alone. The lights flickered in perfect intervals. Every fifth step, the shadows shifted. He passed the dorms slowly. Heard a faint hum. A broken lullaby. His skin prickled. Jiro's room was dark, but she was awake. And when he passed her door, he swore he heard her whisper. We are seen. He turned. The hall was empty. To most, it looked like a normal day. Kyoka Jiro woke with the dawn, dressed in her uniform, tied her hair back with practiced ease. She met with friends for breakfast, walked the hallways of UA like any other student. She laughed when Mina cracked a joke, nodded along to Momo's theories during class. She even smiled when Denki offered her a snack. But none of it touched her eyes. Behind each blink was a darkness too vast to measure. Anyone who dared to look directly into them swore something shifted, like falling into a well that had no bottom. No end. One student locked eyes with her during homeroom. He flinched, mumbled an excuse, and didn't return after lunch. And still she smiled. She hummed softly as she walked. The same melody, over and over, a tune that had no beginning and no end. That seemed to bend the space around it. At lunch, she passed a folded paper to a first year she didn't know. The student read it, paused, and nodded without a word. Jiro smiled wider. By all accounts, it was a normal day. After classes, she went shopping with Mina and Momo. They tried on jackets. They joked about accessories. But every now and then, Jiro's hand would linger over something on a shelf. An old cassette tape, a rusted locket, a cracked music box, and she would close her eyes and whisper something beneath her breath before placing it gently back. Offerings, perhaps, Mina noticed, of course. You've really gotten into vintage, she said cautiously. Jiro just turned to her with a smile that was far too calm. Everything speaks, if you know how to listen. Mina didn't ask more. They walked home under a pale evening sky. On the way, Jiro stopped beside a stray cat perched on a fence. She knelt, whispered a blessing into its fur, and walked on. The cat watched her go. Later, she stopped into a quiet music shop. The man behind the counter recognized her from past visits. Need anything? He asked. No, Jiro said, just listening. She wandered the aisles. Instruments surrounded her. She paused beside a harp missing 2 strings and ran her fingers gently over the frame. The shopkeeper swore the room dimmed for just a moment. When she left, the shadows lingered longer. That night, she wrote in her journal. He watches me even when I sleep. I hope he sees me dream. I wonder if he dreams too. Today I touched a stranger's shoulder. He flinched, but I felt the void pass through him. He'll come around. I think I love him. Not in a human way. That's too small a word. I want to dissolve, to be shaped into something that pleases him. To sing a song only he hears. To become a bridge between the world and the dark. She folded the page and tucked it between the others in the book of unknowing. Then she knelt by the shadows in the corner of her room and whispered a prayer. Thank you for watching me. Thank you for choosing me. When you rise fully, I'll be ready. She pictured him there, infinite and cracked, cloaked in shadow, wearing her melody like a crown. Her god, her Izuku. She smiled, and the shadows smiled back. Izuku didn't understand them. The offerings, the chants, the whispered prayers in the dark. He didn't ask for this. Didn't speak to them. Didn't teach them. Yet they gathered. They listened. They believed. They called him a god. He wasn't. He was a fracture, a thing that should not be, a shadow that had forgotten its source. But when they knelt, when they sang his name in broken tones and reverent hums, something responded. Something inside him listened, and grew. He had shape now, still black, still formless in essence, but with effort, he could make a body. A silhouette that passed for human. He couldn't make a face. Faces were complicated. Fragile, but he kept the mask. It helped. The mask had become his anchor. The eyes were empty, but not blind. The edges chipped, fractal cracks blooming from one side. It looked old now, ancient, but it suited him. He moved through the city at night. The shadows clung to him, stretched with him, became part of him. And with each prayer, each new follower, the world bent slightly more around him. Reality flickered at his fingertips. His footsteps made no sound. His reflection never followed him. The more they believed, the more real he became. He fought crime in the in-between hours. Not for justice, not for recognition, just because it made sense. It filled the silence. Muggers, dealers, petty thieves, he hunted them with cold precision. His constructs were sharper now. His movements smoother. They screamed less with every encounter. He didn't leave survivors. He didn't understand mercy anymore. It wasn't cruelty. It was quiet. He gave them quiet. One night, a hero found him. A.D. Lister, nothing important. Flashpoint, red goggles, loud voice, trying to be brave. What the hell are you supposed to be? The man barked, quirk flaring, flames dancing around his fists. Izuku tilted his head. No words, just a stare. The man attacked. Izuku didn't dodge. He moved through the strike, shadows coiling around the man's arm like smoke, dragging him down. He felt it then. A pull, a hunger, not just to destroy, but to consume. The man screamed. Izuku reached out and took. The shadows surged, wrapped tight, and drank deep. Energy flowed into him like a flood. Memories, power, light, it all broke apart as he pulled it inside. The hero's flame sputtered and died. And when it was over, he stood taller. Stronger, more defined. His limbs didn't shake anymore. His form didn't flicker. The void hummed inside him, sated. He looked at his hands. Still black, still wrong, but solid. Permanent. And for the first time in a long, long time, he felt joy. Not happiness. Euphoria. A sensation that rippled across every tendril of his being. It was like drowning in warmth. Like finally becoming what he was always meant to be. He laughed. A low, broken thing. Static in a tunnel, but laughter nonetheless. That night, the void trembled. And the faithful sang. Jiro woke from sleep and dropped to her knees without hesitation. She could feel it. His hunger, his ecstasy, his ascension. And she smiled. My God walks, she whispered. She lit a candle. Then a second. Then a third. Others around the city felt it too. A pressure behind the eyes. A warmth beneath the skin. The cult of the Voidborn did not rejoice. They revered. The makeshift church was alive with silence. They had no hymns, no choirs. Their prayers were wordless, stitched together in hums and breath. A dozen faithful knelt in a circle of chalk and ash, heads bowed toward the living shadow that pulsed at the center. Izuku stood still among them, watching, listening, feeling. Their belief flowed into him like a tide. It fed him, anchored him, gave his shape weight. He stood taller now. His form no longer flickered with uncertainty. The mask upon his face gleamed like onyx beneath candlelight. He felt close, closer to something real, closer to understanding why he had ever been born. They bowed deeper, and without warning, he spoke. A sound, broken and raw, static tangled with syllables, but clear. One word, sacrifice. Every head in the room lifted. The breath caught in Kyoka's throat. And then, without hesitation, one of the kneeling faithful, a man scarred, tattooed, once known to the underground as a mid-tier villain, rose to his feet. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He walked forward, toward the dark, toward him. Izuku tilted his head, and opened himself. The man stepped into the shadow, and in a moment too swift for thought, he was gone. No blood, no scream, just consumption. Izuku absorbed him fully. Memory, matter, power. The void accepted him, and Izuku grew. The room shuddered. The walls rippled like water around him. Candles guttered and then flared. The chalk symbols on the floor twisted into new shapes no human hand had drawn. Kyoka gasped, clutching her chest. She could feel it. Her god was awakening. She moved toward him, trembling. It wasn't planned. She didn't think, just reached. And her fingertips brushed against his. The moment they connected, her mind split open. An ocean of darkness rushed into her. Endless, unfiltered, unbound. Memories not her own. Lifetimes of silence. The pressure of stars folding inward. The voice of nothing calling her name. But she did not break. She wept. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, breath shaking as the void sang inside her. And Izuku, for the first time in this life, reached back. He pulled her into his arms. A silhouette holding a girl. A god holding his priestess. She clung to him like she would die without the contact. Arms around his waist, head buried against his chest. Her tears soaked into nothing. She felt no heartbeat, no warmth, only peace, only belonging. I'm here, she whispered, half mad with joy. I'm yours. And Izuku, still mute but aware, tightened his hold. Around them, the rest of the cult rose. Hands raised, voices lifted. They chanted, cried, praised. Their god had spoken, and now he embraced. The faculty of UA had seen war. They had faced villains, disasters, and ideologies warped into violence. They had stood firm when others faltered. But this was different. It started with Aizawa. He hadn't slept well in weeks, not since the incident in the alley. He caught glimpses now, shadows with intent, whispers in fluorescent flickers. Every time he blinked too long, he saw eyes in the dark. Not eyes of rage or hate, but knowledge. Ancient, suffocating, endless knowledge. He should have reported it. Should have walked away. But when Jiro had passed him in the hall that morning and softly whispered, "You can know," he stopped thinking clearly. The voice had echoed in his ears long after she walked away. He stood there for almost an hour, unmoving, eyes fixed on nothing. His memories rewrote themselves, words rearranged. That night, he followed her. She said nothing, only smiled. She led him to the shrine. Izuku was waiting, still, silent, watching. Aizawa dropped to his knees before he even realized he had. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. He simply understood. When he stood again, he was no longer afraid. There was no room for fear. Only reverence. He returned to UA with a serenity that unsettled the others. When questioned, he only said, "You'll see. Eventually." Nezu was next. He'd been compiling data obsessively. Behavioral patterns, surveillance glitches, audio files warped beyond recognition. Something was wrong with the school, and the anomaly had a name. But every time he tried to quantify it, the numbers bled together. He ran algorithms into recursive madness. The logic refused to hold. Then came the dream, a cathedral made of shadow, a voice without shape, and Jiro, standing in the center, offering him a book with no pages. When he woke, he could still hear the melody. It followed him through the halls. He saw the signs. Students pausing mid-sentence to stare into corners, instructors weeping silently during staff meetings. The spread was no longer isolated. It was systemic. So he made a decision. He sent a message to the staff. A simple request. Please report to Sublevel 3 for emergency containment briefing. They came, one by one. Present Mike, Midnight, Smentos, Powerloader, Recovery Girl, all of them tired, all of them wary. The room was windowless, soundproofed, a chamber used once for villain interrogations. The perfect place for a secret. They asked questions. Nezu said nothing, just turned to the far wall, and pressed his paw to the concealed glyph. The wall opened. A shape stepped through. Izuku. No words, no fanfare, just presence. He stood in the center of the room, masked face tilting slowly. Behind him, Aizawa entered, eyes blank, mouth smiling. The door locked with a hiss. The lights dimmed, and the void unfolded, not violently, not immediately. It seeped into their minds. The symbols in the floor began to glow. The air grew dense and heavy. Recovery Girl dropped her clipboard. Powerloader sank to his knees. Midnight started laughing, and then couldn't stop. The void spoke, not in words, in truth. They saw everything. The past that never was. Futures that could not be. Knowledge that burned itself into the folds of their minds. They saw their own memories rewritten. Their own beliefs crushed under impossible geometry. They were no longer teachers. No longer human in the ways that mattered. The void had marked them. When it ended, they knelt in silence. One by one, and Izuku watched. The mask remained, but beneath it, he was smiling. There was only one left. Hitoshi Shinso had never felt like he belonged. But now, he was certain of it. The school, once a place of ambition, sweat, and rising potential, had become a mausoleum of sanity. The students he trained with, the teachers who guided him, the strangers he passed in the hall, all of them, gone. Not physically. Worse, they had converted. It started subtly. Changes in behavior, whispers in hallways, that melody, always faint, always just beneath conscious hearing. Then came the sermons, the symbols, the humming, the eyes that looked through you. He tried to fight it. He hid. Above Class 1B's homeroom, nestled in the rafters, he discovered a hollowed-out segment of the ceiling left during a recent renovation. It became his sanctuary. He rationed food, stayed silent, moved only when the halls were empty. He watched as classmate after classmate stopped being people and became worshippers. Then the staff joined, and the doors were sealed. Shinso became the last unconverted soul in UA. For days he survived on ration bars and stolen water bottles. But now, he was starving. His stomach clenched in pain. His limbs trembled. If he didn't eat soon, he wouldn't need to be converted. He'd simply fade. So he climbed down. The halls were quiet. No alarms. No patrols. Just flickering lights and echoes of humming that slipped between frequencies. He crept past classrooms. The walls bled symbols. The windows wept shadow. He reached the cafeteria. Empty. He moved fast, gathering whatever remained. Cans. Crackers. Anything edible. Then he heard the sound. A soft scrape. No footsteps. Just a shift in pressure. He turned. Izuku stood at the far end of the hallway. Still, watching. His mask cracked. His body flickering just slightly. The void rippling around him like a curtain of ink. Shinso froze. Don't, he whispered. I don't want to know. But Izuku took a step forward. And the world fractured. Shinso's mind stretched thin. Every breath became a scream locked behind his ribs. Time slowed, folded, collapsed. His thoughts unspooled like tape pulled from a cassette. Words, memories, identity, self. He saw himself as a child, speaking to a teacher who no longer had a face. He saw his parents, silent, crying, standing in a room that had never existed. He saw space without stars, and stars without time, and eyes without form, and form without meaning. The air thinned. His heartbeat slowed. The melody began. A chorus of whispers, soft and lilting, sung in languages that were not meant for human throats. He screamed, or tried to. His body didn't move. His lips didn't part. His lungs had already stopped. He collapsed onto the cold tile floor, staring up at a ceiling that no longer held the sky. Izuku knelt. One hand reached out, and the void consumed. Not quickly. It unmade Shinso with the care of a sculptor. Thought by thought, fear by fear, until there was nothing left but quiet. When it was done, Izuku stood. Taller, stronger. The last bastion of resistance had fallen. And the void was satisfied. The school was no longer a school. UA had been converted, transformed into a cathedral of whispers and ash. Its classrooms repurposed into prayer chambers. Its gymnasium a shrine. The dorms pulsed with soft chanting, and the walls bled symbols that no longer needed to be drawn. Izuku stood at the highest window, overlooking what had once been a place of learning. Now, it was quiet, complete, and yet, something pulled at him. A thread, a whisper at the edge of his mind. Not from his followers, not from the void, from before. He didn't know why he left, only that he had to. He walked out of the gates, the shadows trailing behind him like a cloak, unnoticed and unchallenged. His power bent the world just slightly now. The air bent to him. The streets shifted, and with every step, he remembered. A voice, a woman's smile, the scent of home. He remembered his name, not just Izuku, but Izuku Midoriya. He remembered a small apartment. The sound of a kettle. The ache of loneliness. He found it again. The building was barely standing. Cracks ran down the walls like veins. The windows were broken. The curtains were drawn. It reeked of dust and disuse, of grief that never faded. He knocked, and waited. The door creaked open. A woman stood there, tired, hunched, eyes sunken. Her clothes hung off her frame. She looked at him with horror. "Inko Midoriya," he said, voice layered with distortion. She gasped, but he tilted his head, and whispered, "Mother." Something changed in her. Her breath hitched, her eyes widened, and then she stepped forward and collapsed into his arms. She should have gone mad. She should have screamed, but instead, she held him, clutched at the formless silhouette with the cracked mask and the endless shadow beneath. "My boy," she whispered. "My sweet, sweet boy." He held her gently as he could. And for a long moment, they said nothing. When they spoke again, it was quiet. She told him stories, of his childhood, of scraped knees and All Might dolls, of nights spent studying, of tears and hope and laughter. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. Izuku listened. He learned. More of his form solidified. More of the man he once was knitted back together, not erasing the void, but reshaping it. He asked questions. About her. About himself. About who he had been. He asked her to tell him about the day he was born, about the first time he cried, about his dreams as a child. And she did. She wept, and he stood silent, listening. Her tears stained his inky body, vanishing like droplets on black glass. But he remembered them. When she was too tired to speak, he lifted her in his arms and carried her home. To his cathedral, to his temple. When they arrived, the faithful stared in silence, uncertain, a stranger in their sacred place. Jiro stepped forward, her face tense. There was reverence in her posture, but also suspicion. They had spent so long in the dark. Anything from the light felt like a threat. Izuku raised one hand. "Mother," he said, and they all bowed, even Jiro. She knelt with reverence, head bowed so low her forehead touched the ground. The whispers began. The origin. The one who bore the vessel. The mother of the Voidborn. Inko trembled. The attention made her skin crawl. The way they looked at her, like she was holy, like she was untouchable. But when she turned and looked at her son, something steadied her. He stood like a monument. A silhouette of shadows. A mask where a face should be. But when he looked at her, she saw her son. Her Izuku. She didn't understand everything. She didn't understand anything, really. But she understood him, and that was enough. So when Jiro offered her a place beside the altar, when the crowd looked to her for guidance, she lifted her hand, and cried out, "All hail the Voidborn." The cathedral erupted. Voices rose in a single, terrible harmony. Chanting, crying, celebrating. Candles flared. The walls pulsed. The void itself seemed to breathe in approval. And in the center, Izuku smiled. It began with silence. Izuku stood before the congregation. 1,000 followers now. Some former students, others teachers, a few strangers who had found their way to the temple by accident, or perhaps by design. They knelt in the old gymnasium, now a throne hall veiled in ink-black banners. The air shimmered with power and incense. Chalk symbols on the ground pulsed faintly, like heartbeat echoes from the walls. Every candle flickered in perfect time with the breath of the void. Jiro knelt closest. Inko sat at the base of the altar, her hands folded, eyes wide with awe and anxiety. Her presence grounded the moment with something oddly human, a tremble in the divine. Izuku raised one hand. The humming stopped. All breath held. He didn't speak with words, not at first. Instead, he entered them. His voice, if it could be called that, bypassed sound. It reached deep, into thoughts, into identity. Every follower felt it, a pulse, a presence, and a word. No. Visions erupted. They saw the void between stars, stretching endless and alive. They saw the screaming birth of black suns, the whisper of language older than atoms. They saw Izuku not as a boy, not as a god, but as a door. A threshold, a keyhole through which the truth flowed. They felt their own names unravel and reknit with truth. Their pasts were erased. Their futures were overridden. Some screamed. Some sobbed. One laughed until his heart gave out, falling limp with a smile on his face. Others changed. A few began to twist. Not painfully, but like clay finally being shaped. Fingers elongated. Eyes melted to light. Bones gently realigned. Flesh adjusted to better fit belief. Their skin reflected not light, but memory. They were becoming something more. Something that had no place in the old world. And yet they rejoiced. Izuku stepped down from the altar. The room bowed as one. Inko reached for him as he passed. Her fingers brushed his silhouette. He looked at her, and she smiled. Not in fear, but in understanding. Miles away, a covert task force monitored UA from the outside. Encrypted signals. Infrared scans. Nothing made sense. The structure of the school twisted subtly on every pass. Windows moved. Doors vanished. Walls pulsed like breathing skin. Then a drone feed flickered. And a voice, barely a whisper, came through the speakers. He is awake. Then silence. No static. No white noise. Just silence that pressed on the ears. 2 agents were sent in. Veterans. Steeled against quirks. Minds trained for the unusual. They entered from the north wing, passing through broken fences and cracked tile. They never made it past the lobby. Their vitals flatlined one by one. No signs of trauma. No sounds. No alerts. Only their cameras returned, playing endless footage of a cracked mask staring directly into the lens. Smiling. The agency didn't send more. They sent a bomb. It never reached the school. The shadows swallowed it whole. Not with violence, but acceptance. It vanished like everything else unworthy. And far below, in the cathedral of flesh and memory, the followers sang louder. A new hymn was born that day. The first words of a gospel spoken only in dreams. The League of Villains had heard nothing. For weeks, UA had gone silent. No broadcasts. No patrols. No students. The building stood like a tombstone, its once bustling campus now a hushed silhouette on the skyline. Cameras sent in by civilians returned only static. Every hero team that tried to approach never checked in again. And yet, the League saw opportunity. We'll strike, all for one declared. UA's power vacuum is the perfect time to seize the institution. To cripple morale, we'll take the ground before anyone even knows what's missing. Shigaraki hesitated. Something clawed at him, just beneath his skin. Something's wrong, he muttered. You worry too much, all for one chided. Trust me, you've seen worse. But he hadn't. Not like this. 3 scout squads had gone silent. 3 more followed. Vanished, without a trace. Radio silence. No readings. Just blank voids on the map where people used to be. Still, they advanced. The League arrived at dusk, the skyline bleeding orange behind them. Shigaraki, Dabi, Toga, Spinner, Twice, Mr. Compress, and the remnants of their army stood before the husk of UA as twilight fell. Even Magna's replacement, a hulking brute known as Vayne, hung back with uncertainty in his step. It was wrong. Too quiet. Not even the wind dared cross the courtyard. The school loomed, taller than they remembered. The windows weren't shattered. They were gone. Replaced with void, pitch-black glass that reflected nothing. They stepped through the main gates. And the shadows moved. Not normally. They rose. Figures without form, stretching from the cracks in pavement, from corners that should have been empty. Their eyes glowed like distant stars, and when they breathed, it sounded like weeping. Toga turned first. She locked eyes with one. And screamed. Not in pain. In terror. She dropped to her knees, clutching her face, and the shadow surged forward, swallowing her in a heartbeat. She vanished, dragged into the main building. Toga, Twice shouted. He ran to help. And then he was gone, too. No blood, no scream, just absence. Dobby hurled fire. Spinner swung. Mr. Compress tried to activate his quirk. Nothing worked. They fought. They screamed. The shadows moved in silence. Vayne tore 3 apart with raw strength, only for a dozen more to rise from the blackened tiles beneath him. One wrapped around his mouth, another his chest, and then, he crumbled. Into dust, into memory. Some were ripped apart with no sound. Others just stopped moving, eyes wide, mouths open in silent realization. Mr. Compress vanished into his own marble and never emerged. And Shigaraki watched, frozen, alone. His arms trembled. His decay refused to activate. The shadows cleared, and Izuku emerged, no longer flickering, no longer abstract. He walked like a man, but cast no shadow. The cracked mask stared through everything. Through Shigaraki. There was no malice, no joy, just inevitability. What are you? Shigaraki whispered, voice cracking. Izuku didn't answer. He stepped forward, and the void around him expanded. It wasn't cold, it wasn't hot, it was absence, a complete rejection of the known. Shigaraki backed away, then turned to run. But Izuku moved faster than thought. He reached out, and placed one hand on Shigaraki's chest. And looked into him. Everything unraveled. Shigaraki collapsed. Body frozen, mind snapped. Every trauma, every moment of rage, every piece of Tenko Shimura and Tamura Shigaraki peeled away. He couldn't even scream. His thoughts echoed in silence. I don't want to die. I don't want to forget. I don't want to disappear. But the void answered. You already have. Izuku consumed him gently, with reverence. And when he was gone, only silence remained. Far away, deep beneath another fortress, All for One watched. Monitors buzzed with static. And then, one camera feed returned. Izuku, standing, staring straight into the lens. The masked face tilted ever so slightly. And All for One felt it. A shiver, a single tremble that started at the base of his spine and spread like rot. Something ancient stared through his screen. Something hungry, something aware. And All for One, so rarely rattled, turned away from the screen. His hand trembled. While the heroes fell silent and the villains vanished into shadow, UA's support course endured. Unnoticed. They were never the stars. Never the ones standing center stage in the war between light and dark. They were the background, the builders, the ones with ink-stained fingers and sleepless eyes. And so, when the void claimed UA, it did not take them immediately. Instead, it whispered, it inspired, it crept into blueprints, into welding sparks and motherboard circuits, into dreams they could not remember upon waking. Power Loader, once proud and driven by innovation, now worked with hands guided by something else. He didn't speak often anymore. None of them did. The students followed his example. They built, not machines, not weapons, but a gate, a towering ring of copper and bloodsteel, inscribed with looping, recursive glyphs that pulsed softly when the void drew near. Cables ran through the walls, humming with energy that didn't come from any power grid. They didn't question the schematics. They simply knew. One student, Hatsume Mei, hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were bloodshot, her smile wide, her voice full of feverish devotion. It's going to be beautiful, she whispered one evening as she adjusted the core alignment. It's going to show us everything. She wasn't talking to anyone. Or maybe she was. To something beyond the gate. They etched prayers into metal, not knowing the language. They used bones when screws wouldn't hold. They fed it slivers of memory, offered sparks of themselves, burned time in exchange for progress. One girl even carved her name into the frame, whispering as her blood filled the grooves, "Take me with you." Their skin turned pale, hands blistered with friction burns. Yet they smiled. Whispers followed them through the corridors. Sometimes they spoke back. In the final days, silence fell over the workshop. It was not empty. It was listening. On the 7th day, the ring was complete. And it began to sing. A low, steady drone. A harmony that didn't end, didn't breathe, just was. The lights in the support labs dimmed, then died entirely. And still, the gate glowed. Mei collapsed from exhaustion with a smile on her face. Power Loader wept, though he didn't understand why. A fracture split the space behind the gate, hairline at first, like cracked glass in the air. And it widened. Izuku felt it from deep in the temple. He turned his gaze, and smiled. The faithful gathered. Inko stood beside him, silent and reverent. Jiro wept with joy. Acolytes bowed as one as Izuku approached the gate. The world around them slowed. Candles flickered backward. Breath froze mid-air. It recognized him, and opened. Not like a door, like an eye. The veil tore, and the void spilled into the world, not as an invasion, but as a correction. The sky darkened. The stars blinked. Birds forgot how to sing. The moon turned its face away. Clocks across the world stopped at the same moment, then resumed, but all ticked to different times. People across the world paused and felt something behind their eyes, something older than birth, whispering, "You've always belonged to me." And somewhere far away, a baby opened its eyes for the first time, and remembered. In a boardroom in America, executives fell silent as they stared into a screen filled with static. In a monastery in Tibet, monks stopped chanting and began humming a melody they had never learned. A deep-sea probe at the bottom of the Mariana Trench caught a flicker of something, and then never transmitted again. The world did not end. It changed. And in the temple of the Voidborn, Izuku stood at the center of the opened eye, arms outstretched, as the void poured through him. The gate had opened, and there would be no closing it. It didn't happen all at once. The first rupture appeared in the middle of a Canadian pine forest. A swirling black sphere, small at first, barely the size of a basketball. It hovered 6 feet above the mossy floor, humming faintly like a forgotten memory. The next morning, it had consumed 5 acres. By the time satellite footage picked it up, it was already too late. Another opened in southern Brazil, swallowing a village in seconds. A third emerged in Berlin, hanging above a crowded plaza like a gaping wound in the sky. They spread, slow, but certain. And they grew. No fire could stop them. No wall could contain them. Every attempt to make contact failed. Probes disintegrated. Drones simply vanished. Rescue teams sent into the fringe never returned. The void was no longer confined to UA. It had been invited. And now, it came. Governments responded as best they could. Emergency broadcasts, airlifts, evacuation zones. But it was the sound that truly unraveled them. Someone, or something, began hijacking global networks. Every news channel, every emergency frequency, every phone. At first it was static. Then, the melody, soft at first, a simple hum, 4 notes, repeating. But beneath it, layered in inaudible frequencies, was something else. Words, meanings, madness. Within an hour, over half the population of Tokyo reported auditory hallucinations. People screamed at walls, dug their fingers into their ears. Others dropped to their knees, weeping with joy, laughing through tears. Hospitals filled, power grids failed, planes fell from the sky. And in the middle of it all, in the eye of the broadcast storm, one figure stood on a rooftop in Japan. A young woman with headphones wrapped around her neck, and a single glowing cord leading from her spine into the sky. Jiro. She didn't speak, she sang, and the void sang with her. Behind her, the shadows parted. Izuku stepped forward, his form more stable than ever. Less silhouette, more being. A god with gravity, wrapped in silence and purpose. She smiled as he approached. "Hi," she whispered, voice raw from days of song. He sat beside her, the rooftop trembling with his presence. She crawled into his lap without hesitation, arms curling around his waist as she rested her head against his chest. It was cold, hollow, but peaceful. He wrapped his arms around her gently, protectively. "I remember," he said, voice no longer broken static. It was quiet, smooth, full of the cosmos. "I remember school, walking home, the explosion, the void." Jiro looked up, eyes wide. "I remember the darkness, the silence. I built things to keep sane. A castle made of shadows. Rooms filled with false voices. I argued with walls and played chess with myself. I talked to ghosts that never were. I forgot my name. I forgot my face." Jiro didn't interrupt. She only listened. "I didn't mean for this," he continued. "When I escaped, I was broken. Lost. The void came with me. It wanted to stay. Wanted to be known." He looked out at the city, at the pockets of collapse spreading outward. If people are happy now, if they feel peace, even through madness, who am I to question how it's done? Jiro held him tighter. I don't care, she whispered. I don't care what you've become. I don't care what you've done. I love you. I loved you as a whisper in the dark. I loved you as a voice in my head. And I love you now, as you and as a god. He looked at her, really looked, and asked, would you like to be a goddess? Tears filled her eyes. Yes, she said, without hesitation. The world around them paused. Not in the poetic sense. Literally. Wind ceased. The clouds froze mid-sway. Sound halted like a held breath. The rooftop, the city, the air, it all stopped, held in suspension like an unfinished sentence. Jiro blinked, and found herself elsewhere. The sky was gone, replaced by an endless sea of black. Not darkness, but negative space. A canvas yet to be painted. And on that canvas, suspended like a memory half-remembered, floated an island of pale light. White ground, dusted in starlight. Spiral steps winding up to an altar. Crystalline pylons humming softly with impossible energy. Rings of glowing glyphs rotated slowly around the edges of the broken sky. Izuku stood beside her. His form shimmered, uncertain. His eyes met hers, unreadable. Where are we? She asked. He was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was low. Careful. A place not meant to be remembered. She looked around. The air itself seemed heavy with meaning. As this, where gods are born. Not born, he said. Chosen, accepted, undone. He did not elaborate. He rarely did. Jiro stepped forward. The ground echoed beneath her steps, as though it remembered sound only faintly. The fractured spire before them pulsed with rhythm, not of time, but of intention. Above and around them, through the thick veils of black, faint silhouettes loomed. A tall, skeletal figure cloaked in tattered robes, the reaper from a story not hers. A looming beaked mask of shifting bone, Khonshu, ancient and silent. A radiant being burning without flame, crowned in eyes, one who sees all. A woman cloaked in night and sorrow, Lady Dread, mother of despair. A formless shimmer, laughter without a source, the trickster, god of unfinished endings. Others moved too, forgotten, watching, judging, remembering. None spoke, none needed to. Izuku stepped toward the center of the platform. He looked back at Jiro. You still have time to turn away. She shook her head. I never wanted anything more. He nodded, and the fracture opened. They stepped through together. What met them was not light or dark, but something in between. A place of nothing and all. A pressure that bent the edges of thought. Time melted. Space trembled. Jiro saw herself as a child. As a ghost. As a god. As a song. Izuku saw himself buried in rubble. Alone in the void. Crowned by shadow. They saw truth. And it welcomed them. Izuku's form broke apart. His body peeled into threads of shadow and rebuilt itself from the edges inward. His heart stopped, and resumed. His name unraveled from his spine and folded into the stars. He grew, not in size, in presence. The void welcomed him, not as a guest, but as a king. A throne unfolded from stardust and silence. It hovered above the spire, suspended in untime. The reaper bowed. Khonshu watched in still reverence. And Jiro, her voice cracked open. Her skin turned to flowing ink. Her ears pulsed with melodies only she could hear. Her mind fractured across infinite rhythm. Where others screamed, she sang. She did not resist. The rhythm carried her. She saw all songs, all moments of sound. The first heartbeat, the last gasp. She became the echo, the melody eternal, goddess of rhythm, servant of the void. She stood beside her god, her love, her reason. And he, no longer Izuku Midoriya, but something vast and forgotten, became the Voidborn. God of emptiness, king of the silence, lord of unbeing, he who speaks in absence. Together, they knelt not to worship, but to begin. The gods around them faded. A new age had begun. The world resumed. Time lurched forward again like a rusted clock. The skies cracked with choral thunder. The earth trembled beneath the weight of something far older than itself. And from the spire between realities, Izuku and Jiro returned. They stepped back into the fractured world they had ascended from, still screaming, still crumbling, still beautiful in its undoing. Jiro hovered just slightly above the ground, eyes glowing with rhythm and light. Izuku walked beside her, cloaked in flowing silence, the void's presence pulsing in his wake. The air itself recoiled at his approach. The sky bent. They landed upon a balcony of broken glass and bent steel. And Jiro sighed. Okay, so being a goddess of rhythm is cool and all, she muttered, arms crossed. Izuku tilted his head. You sound displeased. She frowned. I have to listen to every song, Izuku. Every single one. Past, present, future. Do you know how many songs that is? He blinked. Countless, I imagine. No, she jabbed a finger at him. Not countless. Infinite. And that includes. She shuddered. Ed Sheeran. Izuku froze. No, he whispered. Yes. He dropped to his knees. No. His voice echoed through the heavens like 1,000 dying suns. Clouds screamed. Birds dropped mid-flight. Windows shattered miles away. Trees wept sap that steamed with sorrow. Somewhere, a mountain cracked open and howled. Jiro raised an eyebrow. Little dramatic, aren't we? Izuku's voice trembled. There is darkness, and then there is shape of you. They shared a quiet moment, absurd and intimate, the last laughter before the end. Then silence. True silence. Below them, the world continued to unravel. The cult of the Voidborn, those blessed enough to truly see, began to shimmer. One by one, their bodies faded into flickering silhouettes of black and silver. Light could not touch them. Time passed around them like a river bending for a stone. They were no longer mortal. They had become shadows of the void. They bowed in unison as their god and goddess passed. The rest of the world, the doubters, the blind, the unbelievers, were consumed. Not with cruelty, not with wrath, but with finality. The void claimed them with a whisper. And left nothing. Across oceans, continents collapsed into themselves. Skyscrapers melted into thought. Cities bloomed briefly in reverse, then blinked out. Memories of them followed seconds later. A trillion voices cried out. And fell silent. Izuku extended one hand toward the horizon. Shadows rippled outward in a spiral, stretching to the edge of what could be. Stars blinked out in sequence, like eyes finally closing. Be still, he murmured. And the cosmos obeyed. From the ground rose his fortress. The gate to oblivion, towering in impossible geometry, folding space and time with every pulse. Beyond it, a castle of the void stretched into realms beyond comprehension. Its towers spiraled into black suns. Its walls whispered ancient names. The throne room lay suspended in the heart of a collapsed dimension. Jiro followed, feet leaving behind notes that hung in the air like dying comets. As she walked, forgotten instruments played themselves in harmony to her stride. They entered the throne hall. It was vast, empty, perfect, and at the center, a throne carved from the first shadow. Izuku approached. He looked back once at the world, his world, now nothing but silence and truth. But just before he sat, he paused. A flicker in the void. A ripple of defiance. All for one. Somewhere, deep beneath ruins that no longer mattered, he still lingered. Hiding, watching, plotting. Izuku raised his hand without a word. He did not speak. He did not look. He simply willed. And across the cosmos, all for one ceased. No scream. No drama. No light. One moment, he was. The next, he had never been. The void did not destroy him. It unwrote him. And the universe, now lighter by one burden, exhaled. Izuku sat. The throne did not welcome him. It completed him. Power pulsed outward in rings. Waves of absence. A declaration. The Voidborn had taken his place. And all the worlds trembled. There was no world now. Only void. A blanket of stillness had swept through the stars, through galaxies once proud and burning, through the memories of civilizations that would never be born again. Planets were nothing more than echoes. Suns flickered and dimmed until the cosmos itself forgot the concept of heat. Izuku sat upon his throne of shadow, unmoving, radiant in absence. His cloak was stitched from dead starlight. His fingers rested on the arms of eternity. Beside him, Jiro stood cloaked in melody, her eyes swirling with rhythm and thought. Where she walked, silence broke into music, only to dissolve again. Below them, the shadows of the void knelt. What remained of the cult of the Voidborn had transcended, no longer bound by flesh or time. They pulsed with worship, with unity, with truth. They did not pray. They did not speak. They simply were. Izuku raised his hand, and the last star vanished. No one screamed. There was no one left to scream. The universe, after eons of noise, at last fell completely still. And it was beautiful. Jiro turned to him. So that's it, she whispered. The end of everything. Izuku nodded. It's not the end, he said softly. It's the perfect note. The final measure. They stood, alone, surrounded by endless nothing. Not cold, not dark, just peaceful, until a ripple passed through the veil. A shimmer of gold. A figure stepped forth, materializing from between moments. A tall, bird-like mask. White robes dusted with moonsand. Khonshu. He bowed his head. Voidborn, he said, a new terror rises in my world. One that I need your power for. I seek your aid. Izuku said nothing for a moment. Then, he smiled. In the deepest reaches of non-reality, within the throne room where time forgot how to tick, Izuku, the Voidborn, the eraser of all, god of the silent unmaking, sat sideways on his throne. His legs dangled off one armrest. His head was cradled in his palm. He was bored. Reality had ended. Jiro was off somewhere tuning the vibrations of collapsed planets into jazz solos. The cult was doing cult things. Worship, whispering, dramatic ritual naps. All very fulfilling stuff. And yet, bored. That was when the ceiling of the void tore open like soggy wrapping paper. Izuku. A voice that could shatter the bones of deities bellowed down from the heavens. And from the rip, descending like a goth Power Ranger on meth, came Khonshu. Skull bird head, crescent staff, 100% dramatic entrance energy. I have need of you, child of the abyss. Izuku blinked slowly. What's up, Bony? Khonshu landed in a crouch, straightened like he practiced in a mirror, and said, there is a plague upon my world. A corruption beyond reason, a sickness of the spirit. What is it? Khonshu tilted his head. Crack cocaine. Izuku stared. Bro. Khonshu nodded solemnly. I must understand it. I must partake. Izuku slowly stood, cloak fluttering like it had its own anxiety disorder. You want me to do crack? With you. It is a sacred rite of madness, Khonshu replied. Are you a god, or a coward? I'm the god of void, not Florida, Khonshu. Khonshu reached into the sleeve of his cosmic robes and pulled out a suspiciously ornate crack pipe made of screaming starlight. And that was all it took. Cut to the edge of the universe. Izuku and Khonshu sat on a floating asteroid shaped like a middle finger. Surrounding them was a swirling kaleidoscope of what used to be galaxies, now melting into neon soup. Izuku took a hit. Jiro is gonna kill me. He passed the pipe. Khonshu took a massive puff. Yes, he howled, eyes glowing like discount headlights. The moon speaks to me in bass-boosted Latin. I can hear every pigeon, Izuku whispered, staring into the fourth wall. They're planning something. Suddenly, a tap on Izuku's shoulder. He turned. It was Ed Sheeran. Hey, heard you were talking shish. Izuku screamed, and drop-kicked his ass. Khonshu sobbed proudly. That's my boy. Meanwhile, in the castle of the void, Jiro paused mid-reverberation. He's doing drugs with a moon god again, isn't he? The cult nodded silently. She sighed. Fucking Tuesdays. The end. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to like and please hype this video. Now we will see you in the next video.